Get ready for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down District 4 week in, week out. Brandon Baney joined by Yeller Man.
The boss. This is in my office, and I bring my girls to my office once in a while, my little girls, and they saw that, and they decided to add an ES. So they're bosses, because they are now, we know who the real bosses are when you have kids.
They are bosses in training.
Yeah, so I have that on my shelf just to remind me who's really in charge around here, and it ain't me.
That's funny. So again, we're breaking out everything in District 4 week in, week out on this podcast. You can get audio only at IdahoSports.com and wherever you download your podcasts, video version as well. If you want to see what Scott's little boss nameplate thing looked like, you can do that at IdahoSports.com's YouTube channel or Facebook page, or you can see it like I'm wearing glasses today because my contacts just didn't want to cooperate. So Scott, are you one of those guys that has good vision? You don't need any enhancements or anything? Glasses, contacts?
Well, it's funny because I'm 52 years old, and I got LASIK surgery like in 99, like when it first came out. So I was like, was some dude in the back of an El Camino with a butter knife and in some alley. And he's like, dude, I think I can pull this off. And I got it done and it worked. But, as I get older, it, I can see things, pun intended there. I can notice things not quite the same. So that third eye that you have right there, I don't think it's really there. I think that's my eyes going bad again.
Our boss, Paul Kingsbury, got LASIK surgery last year. And the one thing he didn't realize is it didn't correct his short range vision. And so when he's broadcasting a game now and he's looking down at his roster, he's got to go like this.
And it's funny because I went in for an eye check, and I noticed that, I'm not there yet. I can still read, right? But I thought, what people get the touch up all the time, as time goes on, I've been going on 23 years or whatever. And, when I woke up and got it done, I was 20/10 the next day. It was a game changer, and then, over the course of time, it kind of fizzles out. You might need a touch up, but my eye doctor told me, said, hey, if you can still read right now, don't touch it. But the minute your reading goes, okay, go get your touch up, because if you touch it up now, you're going to lose your reading. So it's like, okay, all right. So I'm hanging on right now. No touch ups. I don't need the readers yet. So I kind of feel once I put those on, I'm just putting me out to pasture. That's kind of how I feel.
It's like you're a coach and it's your timeout. So you want to try and hoard them for the end of the game. You don't want to burn it too early.
Exactly.
Right. For sure. All right. Well, so 99 was when you got your LASIK surgery. It wasn't quite 99, but it's been a long time since the Wendell boys soccer team beat the community school from Sun Valley. A 7-year losing streak snapped this past weekend. I thought it was by far the biggest story of the weekend in the Magic Valley.
Oh yeah, no question. A nice segue, by the way. I kind of wondered how you were going to tie all that together, but you're a pro, man. You get it done.
That's right.
This was a huge win for the program. These are the kind of wins that just catapult you to the next level. And they really put a lot of energy into your season, and it brings teams together. This was a game that really kind of tested the mettle of Wendell because, they were not always in control of that game. They jumped out, community school came back, tied it up. And that was the point right there that you were going to go one way or another. If you were a Trojan, you were either going to find a way to get it done, or you were going to hang your head and say, you know what, here we go again. But they didn't. And that was the turning point to the soccer season for this school, is they found a way to get it done against somebody that they haven't beaten in, these kids' careers ever. And so what a huge win for that program.
Yeah, 7-year losing streak snapped with a 3-2 victory. And you look at the standings right now in boys soccer in the High Desert Conference. It is Wendell alone at the top. They are 7-0 this year, Scott, and it's all been in conference. So they're 7-0 overall, 7-0 in the conference. The Cutthroats are right there. They're 6-1 overall, 5-1 in league. They had one non-conference game against Weezer that we touched on last week on the Prepcast. So it's certainly looking like those two teams could be headed on a collision course, and they meet up for the second time at the Sun Valley Community School on October 3rd, second to last game of the regular season. That's going to be a fantastic matchup.
Oh yeah, no kidding. And if things are going the way that they're going, there's going to be a lot riding on that game too, and if you are a fan of soccer, man, go watch that game. Those are two really good programs with, a storyline behind them. And so October 2nd, was that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, up at the community school. Yep, community school.
October 3rd, actually.
Oh, 3rd. Okay.
Monday the 3rd. If anyone shows up on the 2nd, that's a Sunday. There won't be anybody there. So.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
So that, what a big deal. And Wendell's kind of going through this renaissance right now of their football team's been awesome. Boys and girls soccer, both excellent as well. So it's really nice to see, nicely done by the Trojans. Let's talk volleyball real quick. Jerome hosted the Jerome Invitational last week. We kind of previewed it on last week's podcast. You said that it was scaled back a little bit because you didn't have that second gym like you normally do. But Scott, you were there. You saw pretty much everything from sun up to sundown. What did you see?
I saw a lot of volleyball that day. And we had a really good time. The thing about when you put tournaments together is you're just hoping that there's not these massacres, to where you just have a team that just doesn't compete and it's blowouts, and whether it's volleyball, basketball, whatever tournament you put together. This particular tournament went really, really well in that respect because there were so many close games. We had an 8-team field, an 8-team field, not 18. And all the games were really, really close, competitive, and so many of them could have gone the other way. And coming out on top, we had pool play, and then we had a gold bracket and a bronze bracket. And out of the bronze bracket, we saw the Jerome Lady Tigers come away with the winner of the bronze bracket. They kind of found their stride and got it done. On the gold bracket, the championship bracket, the Weezer Wolverines emerged, and they beat Gooding in the final. And those were really close games. Gooding could have had any of those, but Weezer came out on top. And funny story, hang on.
Live podcasting.
Yes. Okay. This is the trophy that was won by Weezer. I want you to notice something here.
Uh-oh.
Okay, now here's the story. So we were starting the brackets, right? And I bring the big trophy down from my office and kind of put it on display at the table, totally protected. So we thought, and it's also the visual, as you're starting to play, you get to see the trophy, and every once in a while you kind of glance at it. I want that trophy, right? Well, there was a young lady from Gooding who was playing in, I think it was the semifinal match or whatever. And her name is Maddie Morris. And I got permission from her coach. It's funny. There's so many things happening right now because Maddie hit the ball that came over to the scorer's table and broke the trophy. Okay. So everybody's like, oh no, the trophy's broken. What are we going to do? And I'm like, oh no, that's awful. Ah, crap. What are we going to do now? Well, just a little while later, Maddie spills her drink on the floor. On the bench, but it goes out onto the floor. And this is when I learned that it was the same girl that broke the trophy, that spilled her drink. All of a sudden, she is on a roll right now. And so I, being the tournament manager guy, I run to the janitor's closet and I get a mop, and I'm out, and I walk out onto the floor, and they're all just kind of waiting for me. And I bypass the spill and I walk right up to Maddie and I hand her the mop. and she just kind of laughed, and she took it and started walking to her spill. And now I got it. And so I'm down on my hands and knees after I mopped, drying it up, and I've got Gooding's bench right in front of them. And there was about 4 of them that said, "Is this going to be on the podcast?" I'm like, you know what? Dang right, it's going to be on the podcast. And so we had a lot of fun with that, and just teased Maddie. She was a great sport about it. We laughed it all off, but she broke our trophy, spilled her drink, and now I got to go get the trophy fixed. And then took time out to clean up her mess, and it was a lot of fun. We had a great time. And then when we presented the trophy at the end of Weezer, they knew what was going on, and so I'm on the mic presenting the trophy in parts, and said, hey, Weezer, if you want to take this trophy and pose with some pictures, hold it together. I don't know if anybody's got any chewing gum. I don't know. You can have fun with this, picture it up, and when you're done, give it back to me. I'll get it fixed and I'll get it mailed to you. So, and Weezer had a blast with it. They took it out and they were holding it together, and some of them were kind of goofing around with it, and they were all taking pictures, and it was such a fun tournament and a great time. But that was kind of the funny story behind some of it.
Well, and again, if you want to see that trophy, just check out the video version of this podcast. It's definitely worth it. Hold that up one more time.
Yeah. So, and I was pretty proud of the trophy too.
Yeah, that is that's
a good looking trophy.
A tremendous looking trophy for sure.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder Gooding lost. Bad juju after you break the trophy. I mean,
no kidding. But for Gooding, that was good for them. We're talking about Magic Valley sports. I mean, that was good for Gooding because they had one of the better players out, and they were kind of slumping a little bit before the tournament, and they kind of found their stride a little bit and played some really good volleyball, battling Weezer in that championship game. And Weezer is no slouch. They have some girls that can flat out swing.
Definitely. And speaking of Gooding, they're 4-3 overall, 2-1 in league play. Kimberly is the overwhelming favorite right now. Kimberly has kind of ping-ponged between number 2 and number 1 in the 3A coaches poll all year with Sugar Salem. Kimberly is 5-0, 2-0 in the conference. Sugar's had a real tough time reporting all their scores. I think is costing them because there's been a couple of weeks where Kimberly has leapfrogged Sugar Salem because they're not reporting their scores to us. So but Kimberly, obviously very talented. It'll be interesting to see, when they match up with Gooding again. And Filer always is tough. They've had a down year a little bit by their standards, but they're a team to keep an eye on as well. So Kimberly won the first matchup with Gooding 3-0 in a sweep. They will play again next Wednesday, the 21st of September. So we'll keep an eye on that volleyball matchup as well. But Kimberly and Gooding both playing really well. As a tournament manager, Scott, you are in charge of mopping up the floor when there's a spilled drink. You're in charge of getting the trophy and getting the teams and all that. You're also responsible for officials, and that's going to kind of transition into the larger topic we wanted to tackle this week. We've been kind of putting this together for the past couple of weeks behind the scenes, and I think now is the time to bring it out, and that is there's an officiating crisis. Not just in the state of Idaho, not just in the Magic Valley, but the state, not just in the state, but the region, and not just in the region, but the entire country. States from coast to coast are running into this problem where the officiating pool is getting older and older in age. And as more people retire, there's nobody younger to come and take the mantle. And it's for a number of different reasons. So we just wanted to kind of dive into it and explore what is going on, because it's to the point now where it's affecting schedules, where games and matches are getting moved all the time. And eventually I think it's going to really hurt the younger levels, the freshman, JV, sophomore level type games where they say, get your own officials and you figure it out.
Yeah, it is such a multi-layered, lots of moving parts in this argument too, or this discussion rather. But there is a lack of officials, and it is hurting our ability to schedule games, to keep our sports going. And, and what it does is it really kind of makes a lot of kids and coaches disinterested in getting involved, because the games are so volatile sometimes in a couple of different ways. And we'll get to some of that here in a minute. But over the course of the last week or so, I've had some great conversations with commissioners of different sports and asked them their thoughts on it, because they're on the front line scheduling all of these officials. They know why officials are leaving. They know why officials are not coming to them. And so the answers I got from all of them were really, really interesting, but there were some common threads. And when you think about lack of officials, the number one thing that everybody says is the parents. They are tired of getting yelled at by parents and fans. And it's to the point to where it's not fun. It's, it's sucking the fun right out of it, and if you go to any game, you would be hard pressed to watch a game where you don't see a fan or fans absolutely lose their minds over something, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the town that they live in. It's embarrassing for their kids if they have kids that are playing, because there's my dad acting like a complete buffoon up in the stands, and I'm supposed to focus on the game. That's the number one thing that everybody I talked to said about the lack of officials is the behavior of parents and whatnot. And the funny thing is, and this was such a noticeable thing for me, because COVID has changed everything, in a lot of different ways. And I thought coming out of COVID, because we were so restricted with fans, that first year back where we had limited people in the gyms, it was glorious. It really was. You didn't get the experience of the crowd and all that kind of stuff. There's something to be said there, and that's not what you hang on.
Live podcast, folks.
Yeah, I know, right? And what you didn't get was all of the bickering and the yelling. And so I thought, coming out of that, when we got everybody back together, everybody would be so appreciative of taking that time away that they would be more behaved. Well, that has not been the case. And that really shocked me, because I remember going to that first state basketball tournament, broadcasting, and we were doing the 4A girls tournament, and we had some crowds behind us. And there was one particular school that their fans were so bad that I had to stop off air and talk to my broadcast partners. I've never seen anything like this. Just the behavior, the stuff that they were yelling, it was so personal to officials. And I'm thinking, okay, write it off. 2 weeks later, I do the boys state tournament. Same thing happened. I've never seen anything like it. And so these fans and parents are behaving like children, and they are driving good officials and good people away from sports. That's the number one thing. Now, there are other things that play into it, of course, but that's the number one thing that came up on everybody's radar.
Yeah, and I know what school you're talking about. I'm not going to say it, but I will say that I also have done a game of theirs, and it was a basketball game, and there was some John going back and forth between the two teams on the court. It was a really intense game, and basically the best player from the opposing team went up for a shot and got fouled and fell to the floor, and a fan from that school that you and I are both talking about yelled, "And stay down." And I was appalled when I heard that. I was like, that's a 17-year-old athlete. And so it's also, it goes hand in hand with coaches. Yeah. That's why nobody wants to coach anymore.
You're absolutely right. Everybody is an expert. Everybody knows all the rules. Everybody knows exactly how it's supposed to be played. And every parent has a D1 athlete on the floor or the field, and you look at the lack of filter that people have these days. I think really you can tie that into the society that we live in with social media. With a constant platform right at your fingertips, you don't need to think about what you say anymore. And we post whatever online. We have no boundaries. We say whatever we want. And I think that mindset sometimes is kind of creeping its way into real life and our interactions live with real people is that we don't have a filter. We'll say whatever the heck we want to say when we feel it, driven by emotion, not driven by logic. And nobody stops to think anymore. All they do is react. And that is the world that we're living in right now. And it's absolutely disgusting on a lot of levels because it's ruining a lot of great things.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to bring this up, but we kind of segued into it. I got an email last night from a fan, and I assume they're from Skyline. I don't know, but they were talking about how we tuned into the Burley Shelley broadcast, and all your announcers kept talking about. That was a game we did on IdahoSports.com last week. By the way, Burley 3-0, looking good. Gatlin Bear, another awesome game. He had the game-winning touchdown. It was the #1 play of the week, depending on who you talk to. But they said your announcers just talked the whole time about how Gatlin Bear is the best recruit in the state of Idaho, and that's not true. Kenyon Sadiq is, and Bear's not even ranked in the top 70 for the class of 22 and 23. And you guys worship him. And I emailed back and I said, well, first of all, you're right. Kenyon Sadiq is the #1 player in the class of 23 because Gatlin Bear is in the class of 24. That's why he's not showing up on your top 70 list. He's a junior.
Yeah.
And if you look, him and Kenyon Sadiq are right there. And I said, can't we just agree that both players are awesome? Why do you have to tear down one athlete to prop up another? But you're right. He got on the computer. I don't know who this person is. Fired off an email. There was a lot of grammatical errors, but basically I emailed back and said, hey, thanks for watching the game. I said, we're going to have Burley Minico again this week. So tune in if you want to, or if you want to hear announcers talk about Kenyon Sadiq and how great he is. We're also doing the Skyline game, and you're free to tune into that as well. So, I basically left it there.
And it's funny because we, as coaches, have always had since the beginning of time the 24-hour rule, right? So if you agreed or disagreed with something, you had an issue, whatever, you had to wait 24 hours, and that is where you let the emotions subside and logic to kick in. Well, even though we still have that 24-hour rule where parents and fans or whatever are not allowed to contact anybody, that doesn't stop them from doing exactly that, from firing off an email or getting on social media and just blasting whatever. Because, you look at the things that get posted, I would be willing to bet that the vast majority are all negative. I mean, nobody calls over a manager at a restaurant to talk about how great things were. They called him over to complain. Nobody gets online to post things about a game so much if it's not something negative or a critique of some kind. That is just the world that we're living in. Everybody's negative. I mean, I think we're kind of wired that way in a way, but at the same time, when you give us this platform of social media with not the ability to think at all, and just react and be emotional, man, this is bad stuff that's happening. And so going back to our officials, yeah, I mean, this is who we are now. We just sit there in the stands and we react. We don't think. And what we forget sometimes is these officials, they are people too. They're going to go home to their families. They are going to go home to their kids that they don't get to see because they're making $50 doing a game, right? And they also have to understand, too, that a lot of those families of these officials support. They show up to, be there for their husbands and wives and whatever they're officiating, and they get to listen. Their families get to listen to that crap getting spewed by fans that think they know everything. And that's why I'm the yeller man today, because that is who we are becoming in the stands. And that's, like I said, the #1 thing that everybody has come back to me and said is the fans. Now, there's other things too that we'll talk about, but that's #1.
Yep. Last point. When I was in high school, I umpired Little League baseball in the small Montana community I grew up in. And to the point, I mean, our town's small enough that I knew most of the coaches and knew where they worked. And they would get on me. I'm a high school kid out there getting paid $10 a game or whatever it was to ump this Little League baseball. And I would always turn to the coach and go, Troy, you work down at the hardware store, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to show up tomorrow and yell at you the whole time you're trying to do your job about how much you suck at it. Okay. Sound good? That's really what it is, right?
It is. And what they don't understand is that this is the second thing. There's a lot of reasons why we don't have officials, but another thing was they're not getting paid enough to take that kind of abuse, and so they're not getting paid to be yelled at. They're not getting paid to be away from their families for an entire night. Everybody has day jobs. And so they go to their day jobs. And then as soon as that's over, they're gone to a game. And a lot of times, depending on where it is, they don't get home until late. So they're sacrificing time with their families, and so you're gonna ask these officials to weigh, okay, my little pay to get yelled at and to be away from my family. What choice are you going to make? Because really it's just like coaching. A good official, they don't do it for the money. They do it because they love the sport. They love the game. They love the kids. They love being around it. And that's the same thing with coaching. But even now we're driving those kinds of people out, and it's sad. And another thing that kind of came up too was the lack of, and I found this part really interesting, is a lot of officials are a little intimidated because they don't know all the rules. Well, I mean, my gosh, there's a ton of rules in every single sport, and they get training, but here comes the human element again, right? They're going to make a mistake, and people put these officials on some kind of weird pedestal as if they are not allowed to make a mistake. But I'll tell you what, every mistake they made, they hear about it time and time and time again, over and over and over again, to the point where all of a sudden now they're distracted because they're not focused on the game. They're focused on little Jimmy's dad in the stands acting like a maniac, and they're not dialed in like they should be. We don't give officials a pass on a bad call. We don't. And the rule thing popped up in a lot of my conversations. Well, funny thing is, maybe all coaches and parents ought to take a rules test before they open their mouths, right? And because so many times they are complaining about something that if you understood the game, there's like, dude, shut up, man. You have no idea what you're talking about, And so again, you can see the multi layers of this whole discussion.
Yeah, I mean, the classic cliche is basketball, over the back. There's no such thing as over the back. That doesn't exist anywhere in the rule book. So, right. But you hear it yelled about it's five times a game.
I mean, and that is so true. It's just like they have to take a rules test to be an official, right? They have to understand, but it's a constant learning curve. They're not going to be great right away, just like anything. You try any new skill, you are not going to be the best right away, and you may never get to that point, but you're always going to learn and get better, just like your job and everything else that we do, So rules were a big one. The time away from family and job and whatever is another one. And pay was another one as well. And that one's an interesting one too, because, you look at officials' pay, and I don't think you can pay officials enough. You just can't, for what they are trying to do, what they're being forced to, endure. But the problem is the people that fit the bill for the officials are the schools. Schools pay officials, and schools don't have any money. And so we are trying to find different revenue streams to pay these officials out of our gate, because the basic revenue for an athletic program is going to be gate, and it's going to be like activity cards. And really that's about it. I mean, unless you have other different streams of revenue, that's it. But what's happening is that the officials get a pay raise. They all got a pay raise, as deservedly so. The problem that a lot of activities directors are having is just like, how do we pay them? We know they're worth it, but we can't afford it. And so now you've got this cycle that is just, I don't know, it's not sure which direction it's going, but we know the value of good officials. We got to find a way to pay them, and schools don't have the money. So we are now all trying to explore different ways to get it done. Okay. And don't mistake that for saying that we don't need to pay officials, because we certainly do.
Well, everybody needs to be paid more because of where we're at right now as a country, as a society. I mean, the stock market has taken a bath. The price of eggs is up 37% because of inflation. Everything costs more. And so therefore people, this goes back to the officials deciding, is it worth my time? Is it worth if I'm going to be struggling to buy groceries and all of that anyways, I might as well spend the time with my family as opposed to going to work and be an official. And so I agree. Let me ask you, how feasible, how realistic is it for the governing body of Idaho, the IHSAA, to have a fund that goes to paying officials instead of leaving it up to schools? Because, a school like Castleford, which doesn't have very many people, period, they're going to draw less fans than a Bishop Kelly just because of the population. So how do they counteract that?
That's a good question, and it just seems like there's getting more and more things thrown at schools and athletics and activities. I mean, the shot clock is another great example. Okay. Yeah. Everybody wants a shot clock. Well, who in the heck's going to pay for it? We have to buy these things. We have to pay for them, pay to get them installed, pay new workers that we don't have to do all this. So yeah, it sounds great, but where's the money coming from? And that kind of goes to the same thing with officials. And depending on where your school is at and the population that you're talking about, yeah, your gate receipts aren't going to be huge, and I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps the IHSAA can step in and take some of that money that they allocate back to schools into another pool of officials to help us out with those costs or help us out with the shot clock that they're making us put in. I mean, we cannot keep shouldering more responsibility because we don't have the revenue. Now we're going to have to figure it out. And I would say before a shot clock, before anything else, we've got to make sure we take care of our officials. And so that's number one. We'll find a way to get it done. We have to pass the hat, in the middle of the crowd. Hey, help us pay for officials, and so be it. But we're going to get it done. We're going to find a way to do it because these people are valuable to us. It would be nice if we did have some help, though.
Yes. And so now schools are having to get creative with how they schedule. You have to be willing to move your game a night or two, depending on what happens. We really saw it during like baseball and softball season. It seemed like with umpires, especially. And then you have to also, for example, 2 weeks ago, Oakley, their football team played Kendrick, right, in that neutral site game in Cambridge. Originally, it was a 6:00 kickoff. Well, all of a sudden, our pool of officials over there in District 3, we don't have enough to cover the night. Can you guys move your game up to 4 so our officials can go somewhere else close by when the game gets over to do a second game that night? They said, sure, we can do that. We'll kick off at 4. Last week up north, Clearwater Valley, Mullen St. Regis was supposed to play Kootenai. Well, Kootenai's got low numbers, so they dropped out. They picked up a game with Deary, but then they got to find officials. And so they came to an agreement and said, well, what if we met halfway in Wallace and we played at 3:00 and then Wallace plays at 7:00 and it's a double header and the same officiating crew can do 2 games in a row. And so I guess that's kind of what I've seen with the smaller schools is they get creative and say, let's stack it. Let's do a double header. Let's move our game up early so these crews can go do a second game.
Right. No. And you see that kind of stuff happening all over the place. And, what you're doing is you're spreading your officials out so thin that burnout starts to kick in, and they've got to find a way. We have to find a way to get more officials and keep them hungry and keep them wanting to be there. There's always a difference between wanting to and having to. You need these officials to want to officiate, not have to officiate, and if we can get to that point, man, it's back to where it was 20 years ago, where people did show up and we had an abundance of officials. We have a football game coming up here in a couple of weeks that we don't have enough officials for it. So we're bringing in District 3 officials, District 3 or 5, but they're not here because there's too many games going around and we just don't have it, so, we got to figure something out. But I think the number one thing that we have to do is we have to behave ourselves in the stands. That is number one. If we can't do that, then the rest of the reasons that we talked about, they won't matter.
How will this impact the younger levels going forward? Freshman basketball, JV football games. Will those just go away? If it's like, if we only have a finite amount of resources, we're only going to focus on the varsity?
You know what? If it gets to that point, something has to give. And the levels that are going to suffer are going to be the younger kids. And if those younger kids suffer, then what good is that doing for our varsity teams? Junior highs are already in trouble when it comes to officials because, they're not being taken care of under that umbrella of high school officials because there's not enough to go around, and so a lot of middle schools are forced to go get their own certified, non-certified, whatever, to help officiate games. And another thing to consider too is the fact that depending on what sport you're doing, the level of intimacy of the crowd on top of you dictates a lot of that as well. You are a little bit more removed in football and you can't hear as much, but basketball, holy crap, they are right on top of you. Baseball, generally a very quiet stadium, you hear everything. Volleyball, they're on top of you. So that level of intimacy you have with the fans, certain sports are suffering a little bit more than others. But as a whole, yeah, we got to get something figured out, because if we do have to make sacrifices in the younger groups, then our younger kids aren't coming out. And then there's no interest, and sports as a whole is going right down the tank.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope for sure. And so you mentioned it. When you're an official and you're first starting out, I mean, what's one of the first things you do? Junior high basketball, junior high volleyball. And if the parents are vicious at that level, that's going to turn off that young official before they can even have a chance to get their career started. So I agree. What do you do as an athletic director, Scott? You're obviously, when Jerome is at an event, home or away, there's always somebody from the school, a principal. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's to make sure that the student body is respectful and under control. But what do you do about the adults? Are you allowed to regulate that as an athletic director?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So it's funny because we have administrators at almost every game, home and away, and we monitor the crowd. And I'll tell you what, our student body, and I think I can say this for a lot of student bodies, not all, but they generally are not the problem. They're just going to treat it like a big party. If anything that they're doing, it's more of a collective group, like, back to basics, whatever they're doing. That kind of stuff is what student bodies do. Student bodies aren't screaming personal stuff at an official. That's coming from parents and that's coming from fans. And so as an administrator, if we have that, then, every school's different, but those people don't get to stay in the gym anymore. And, if the officials are now getting a little bit more, they're getting more trained to not put up with that crap anymore. But that's a double-edged sword, because now all of a sudden they're paying a lot of attention to what's going on in the stands and not so much what's going on in the game. And then they can stop and say, I want you out of here. And then all of a sudden the administrator has to go get that person. It's a walk of shame. They are ejected. They're suspended for 2 games. They have to undergo an online test, a parenting test, so to speak. And it's crazy. But as administrators, you bet we will not put up with that at all. And I know that a lot of people that I'm friends with that are administrators feel the exact same way. They tell their people, if you want to come to these games and you want to yell at officials, then you don't come to these games. Okay, that's ridiculous. So the problem isn't so much the student body, the problem is the parents and the fans.
Yeah. And again, we like a lot of these big topics, it kind of turns into a think tank and what are possible solutions. I think we've arrived at parents, unless it's going to be something positive, it's better to just not say anything, cheer on the team, applaud your son or daughter and leave it at that. That's the number one easiest way to make sure officials stay motivated and in the game. The second part's a little more difficult, the money part. I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some way that there can be a fund from the governing body of Idaho's schools kind of set aside for officials.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice. It's a necessary evil that we are going to have to shoulder, and that's just to come up with the money somehow. And that's going to mean what it does. It means, saying no to certain requests from programs because the funding isn't there. But you've got to prioritize. Do you want to have games or don't you? And if you do, then we got to make sure that we take care of the basic elements first, and that's the officials. So we're going to pay them. Now, if you want a new net or a new ball or something, I may have to say no because I don't have the money for it, but the thing is, prioritize. And this is all about officials, and we've got to make sure we take care of them somehow.
Can't have a game without somebody to officiate it. So we'll leave it there. I know you reached out to a lot of District 4 commissioners across the various sports, and there are certain specific things, sport specific problems, but overall the themes you identified, I think can. Yeah. Well,
and I don't want to leave this in a complete sour taste in everybody's mouth, because we want officials.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, officiating is so much fun. It's you get a nice little high, a nice little buzz. You're right in the middle of the game. You get your steps in, but you're involved and you're an integral part of the maturation process of these athletes and these students, and growing up, you're a big part of their lives. And these are valued professions or valued jobs that we need. And there's so much good in officiating that, if you are out there and you are interested, you want to try it, then get a hold of, your local athletic director, and they can put you in touch with somebody. But, this is kind of a plea to, hey, come out and give it a shot. It's not as bad as we're probably making it sound, but those are the things that need to get fixed, because that's, the issues that we're having. But come out and give officiating a try. We need you.
Yeah, at least give it a try. I've umpired baseball in the past, and I always had fun doing it. So, it's definitely something that everybody should explore. And we'll see. Hopefully, we're not having this talk again this time next year. Hopefully, there's maybe some improvements and machinations in place that'll help improve this. But as always, good discussion. And again, this doesn't apply just to the Magic Valley. It's everywhere in the state of Idaho is running into the same thing. So all right, Scott, as always, nice job doing your homework and coming well informed, well prepared, and we'll be back at it again next week to break down the biggest stories going on in the Magic Valley for athletics.
Absolutely. And a big shout out as we end this thing to all of our umpires and officials that stick through it. They are very much appreciated. So thank you.
Yes, they like the coaches get too much of the blame sometimes when it comes to fan reaction. So, all right. Again, Magic Valley Prepcast. We'll be back next week to break it all down again. For Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in on IdahoSports.com.